Okay, so once again, colleagues, welcome to session one, part B in the 2025 academic year. So we are dealing with AUI 4862 lecture session with myself, Mr. Privilege, here at Grad Consulting. So what would we want to look into now? So I want to introduce you to topic one, corporate governance and ethics in different organizational environments. So if you remember very well, I pointed out that for the purpose of topic one, what I did is I made footnotes, literally in most of the parts of the textbook as you proceed with it right across, especially on the principles that I pointed out that are essential in this module, principles 6, 7, and 8. I'm not saying the other principles are not important. They are equally important, but the ones I'm emphasizing is because of how often they are tested when it comes to the context of assignments, as well as in the context of the exam itself. So that's why you discover, for instance, okay, just to give you light here, because I want you guys to see why I'm literally taking you through this. So what I did is for those principles, I made footnotes, right? So that I can make it easier to point out to you colleagues, even when I was doing my personal study, because I discovered that chapter 4 is a very big topic. So if I was to make notes, writing down on paper and stuff like that, I felt like for me, it was not going to be as effective, or rather, should I say, efficient enough because of the longevity or the length of the chapter itself. So what I decided to do is to pinpoint important segments of note based on what the examiner tests often. So that was my approach when I was doing my personal study with regards to chapter number 2. So with regards to topic number 1 rather, so not chapter, topic number 1 of this module, AUI 4862. So that's what I did. So governing structures, delegation, of course, like I said, guys, there are other principles of note that you need to know for the purpose of this module. I'm going to take you through them. Like for instance, just so that we are not all over the place, I'm still going to come back to principle 6 in any case. For principle 1 and principle 2, they are very, very important as well. Please take note of that. Principle 1 as well as principle 2. I saw them in one of the past, I think it was past assignments, if I'm not mistaken, for 2022. There was a question where even actually last year, there was a question in one of the assignments where they were testing about principle 1 and principle 2. Of course, it will not be brought to you in plain black and white like that, but when you go through a scenario and you look at the required section of the question, you can perceive what principle, what concept is really being tested. See. So I think before maybe we jump into principles 6, 7, 8, let me start you with principle 1, leadership. Now, one of the important things that you need to take note of in principle 1, this is principle 1 of the King 4 report. So when I'm referring to principles, to say principle that, principle this, I'm really referring to the King 4 report. That is the prescribed text that I'm referring to. In corporate governance, colleagues, there's what they call recommended texts, and then there's what they call regulatory texts. So with the regulatory texts, these legislations, these legislative documents which companies or business organizations, so to speak, are expected to observe and comply with. They have no option, they just have to observe and comply with the legislative documents. A good example that I can give you of one such legislative document is the Companies Act. It's one of those that organizations or companies in particular are expected to observe. And when I'm saying companies, I'm also referring to the objects and the role players of the companies in context. So we're talking of the likes of those that are charged with the corporate governance responsibilities. So we're talking in the capacity of directors of the company, right? So they have a role to play when it comes to certain responsibilities according to the Companies Act. Now, there is also the same that you would find or similar, but now in this case, it will be coming from a perspective of a recommended text, such as the King 4 report, as you can see it portrayed on your screens right now. So these are recommended actions. So it's not something that they are mandatory, it's not mandatory requirements as compared to the the legislative documents. Right? But with this one, these are recommended practices, recommended actions, which those charged with corporate governance responsibilities are expected to, to follow and observe. So leadership, right? It's one of those important principles in corporate governance. So when you're talking of leadership, obviously it's referring to leadership of the board of directors. What are the qualities that the board of directors in an organization should portray? What qualities should they possess in essence? Right? So leadership, ethics, and corporate citizenship. So, but for now, I'm dealing with leadership. So guys, what you need to know as far as leadership is concerned, there's what they call leadership principles, right? Very important to take note of. There are leadership principles to take note of that we are going to discuss about. There are about 6 of them. I'm going to lay out to describe and to lay out those principles for you. So the first one is the fact that the board of directors should lead should lead with integrity, regarding to the affairs of the company that they are, in charge of. So when you're saying they should accept integrity, it's accepting integrity in the sense of how they deal on behalf of the organization and how they relate with other parties apart from those within the organization. There have to be some sort of trust that is established, and they are expected to perform their responsibilities with due diligence and with professional care. And very important, in all respect, all this should be done in the best interest of the organization in question. And integrity also means that the directors are expected to be honest in their decision making on behalf of the organization in question. They are supposed to be honest on any action that they would carry on behalf of the company in question. And they should also ensure stakeholder inclusivity. It's part of those that reflect that directors they possess the quality of integrity necessary. Now, and when we're referring to directors here, we're referring to 3 groups of directors, irrespective of the board irrespective of the board committees in which they could be categorized or classified under. So there are 3 types of directors. There's executive directors. These are the ones that are involved with the organization on a day-to-day basis. So the likes of your CEO, the likes of your CFO, Chief Financial Information Officer, CIO, these are your executive directors, right? Those individuals that are actively involved with the company's day-to-day activities. Then you have what we call non-executive directors. Non-executive directors are those directors that are not actively involved with the company on a day-to-day basis. So it's just basically the opposite of an executive director. So if you're non-executive, you are basically the opposite of an executive director. So you're not actively involved in the affairs of the organization on a day-to-day basis. But of course, you would need to help to make some strategic decisions to help the organization to move forward. But usually that is when you have your annual general board meetings, the AGMs. Then there's what we call an independent non-executive director. Independent non-executive directors, right? These ones, they are more independent in capacity, in the sense that their objectivity is not compromised, number one, and also their ability to carry out certain responsibilities would not be affected by what is happening in the organization in any way. There's no undue influence, basically, yeah, in any case that would affect or impact their ability to perform on behalf of the organization. But there are other things, obviously, colleagues, that would help you to disseminate whether a director is independent or is not independent. But we're going to deal with that later, right? But for now, I wanted you to have a bit of enlightenment with regards to the principle of integrity. Then moving from integrity, a director is expected to be competent. So if you are competent, it means, number one, you possess the relevant academic knowledge, skill required, and experience necessary for you to perform your duty as in the capacity of a director. Number two, competencies also means that there's a mix of different experts in the composition of the board in place. So we cannot just have a team, for instance, we cannot just have a composition of the board of directors which comprises of lawyers only, I mean, you need to have people with financial knowledge, financial literacy. That is where accountants come in as well. So that mix of different experts is very important. So you also need to have people with knowledge and exposure to economics, and different fraternities, really, in order for the directors to be considered to be competent, right, enough to perform. And then number three, with still under competency, there's need for diversity. So in terms of corporate governance structure, there has to be diversity, mixture of people from different race, various age groups and gender. There has to be that for the team to be considered to be competent. And then very important, directors are expected to be up to date with the changes happening in the market or in the area of operation of the business in context, right? So these changes, colleagues, you need to take note of this. These changes can happen from a social scale, right? From a social scale. So in other words, these are changes happening in society. It can also happen from an environmental perspective. It can also be an economic environment perspective as well. So those changes or such changes can occur from that perspective or from that angle. We need to be aware of them in order for us to be competent and effective enough to carry out our duties as directors. So that's another important quality of leadership that directors should possess. All of these things that you see that I've summarized, they are here. Of course, here they expound a little bit in detail, but what I did is I pinpointed the important details for you. And just to simplify so that you know what are the important details to note from that. I hope it's making sense and value adding to you, colleagues.
Yes, it does.
Yes, Prof.
Wonderful, wonderful. So that was the principle of competency. And then moving forward, number three, it's the principle of responsibility. So directors are expected to be responsible. They're expected to be, to carry out their duties in a responsible manner. So what does that mean? So we're going to discuss that just now. So the responsibility of directors is based upon two angles. Number one, it's based on their decision-making process. And number two, it's also based upon the action that they take. Very important. So you can know whether a director is, behaved in a responsible manner based on the decision which they took on behalf of the organization. And also you can look at the action that they actually implemented as well. So that's one other angle that would help you to determine whether a director was responsible enough. So very important to take note of that. So directors should be responsible in respect to the decision that they make on behalf of the company they are leading or that they are steering, right? Leading and steering is pretty much one and the same thing, just interchange of terminology. Directors are also expected to, to consider the action that they take on behalf of the organization. Is it to the best of interest of the company, or does it deprive the company in any way? If it is not to the best of interest of the company, then it follows that decision would not be viable. And if it's not viable and the director considers that, it means they are being responsible. But if they take an action, though knowing fully that the action they are taking is not going to be in the best of interest of the company, therefore it implies they are not performing with responsibility in terms of their capacity as director. So you're going to be getting scenarios where you need to evaluate to say what principle of leadership was violated and why are you saying that principle was violated, something of that sort, right? It almost sounds like your IIA code of ethics, but yeah, this is more related to directors, not internal auditors per se. All right. So that's with regards to responsibility. Let's go to the fourth one, which is accountability. So colleagues, with regards to accountability, look, accountability is portrayed usually through the reports, which directors, in fact, accountability is shown when there is reporting taking place. We are going to look, of course, at other aspects. For as long as the reports are there, it means there's a sense of accountability which directors have. But when we see no reports being made at all, when we see missing documents which are supposed to be in place not being produced, then there's lack of accountability in the way that organization is carrying out its activities, right? Okay, no. For confidentiality's sake, I'm not going to mention what I wanted to mention now. Let me leave that one. So that's accountability. So it's much more related to the reporting. So now what do you look at to see whether there's accountability in the actions taken by the directors? Number one, quality of the report. Quality of the report matters because yes, there can be a report, but if it's not up to quality, up to standard, it still implies there's lack of accountability. See, and also that follows this lack of responsibility as well, because the quality of the report should be one that is understandable to the user and that portrays the information necessary for the user to make an informed decision. And the structure of the report also counts, and the stakeholder inclusivity is part of it as well. So for us to know there's proper accountability taking place, there has to be consideration of who the report is going to be affecting. That's stakeholder inclusivity, right? So hence you notice that the current common form of reporting that organizations use now, it's in form of integrated reports. Hence you notice, for instance, even with regards to your if you check the previous exam, even the previous assignments, particularly assignments, they gave you, they would literally refer you to a practical integrated report of an existing entity, organization. Now you need to go to that integrated report and get some details there, which could somewhat give you perspective on how to respond to the required section of the question. Why? Because in these modern days that we are living in, companies are expected to produce integrated report to give a holistic account of what is happening in that organization. So an integrated report, in simple terms, it's basically a consolidation of various reports. Right. It's a consolidation of various reports of the organization. So that's why you notice in an integrated report, you're going to find the annual financial statements, you're going to find the audit report, you're going to find the audit committee report, internal audit report, and other various reports in that same document. Now, the purpose also for an integrated report is because it affects various stakeholders of interest in the organization. It affects shareholders. So for the shareholders, for instance, their interest is really here in the annual financial statements. You know, of course, they might look into the other reports, maybe for sustainability purposes to say, okay, why? Well, as much as the company might appear or portray to us that they are being profitable, or there is what I call a return on shareholders investment, right? Looking at their, looking at their Ration report, or which is part of the financial statements anyways. So when you look at the part where they're reporting about the ratios, maybe it appears as though their return on investment is really great or it's really positive. But then when you look at other reports, you discover that no, maybe this company is even having litigation cases which are pending. Maybe because of a product which they sold to the consumers, which ended up causing some form of a sickness, or which ended up causing even death, for example. So obviously, if a company is faced with such dilemma, though they might appear to be performing positively financially, but they might not be as sustainable because the litigation case which will be pending could negatively impact their foreseeable future. So those are things that stakeholders, various stakeholders to the organization could be interested in, apart just from financial statements. That is the purpose why integrated reporting is being followed by many organizations, why it's also a way of just ensuring there's proper and adequate accountability to interested parties of the organization. Is it making sense, colleagues?
Yes.
Yes, Prof.
Right. So that's accountability for you. Then number 5, it's fairness. Okay, fairness. All right, fairness. So directors must consider and balance the legitimate and reasonable needs, interests, and expectations of all stakeholders. So if there is cognizant of basically shareholders, not shareholder management, it's stakeholder inclusivity. So fairness and stakeholder inclusivity, they really go in relation together. So directors should ensure fairness in how they portray the information to interested parties. It means that the interests, the needs, and the expectations, very important. 3 important things there: needs, interests, and expectations of all stakeholders, right, should be considered. The moment you do that, it means you're being fair, because you're considering the needs, the interests, and expectations of all the stakeholders, not just one side of the stakeholders. For example, if your focus as an entity, as an organization, is only profit making, or rather basically enriching the shareholders to the organization, but while disregarding the society, or while disregarding the negative impact you might be making to the environment, then it means you're not being fair in that case. Why? Because you're not considering the needs of the society at large. So that's important. That's the principle of fairness there that directors should possess. And last but not least, it's transparency. There has to be transparency. Transparency happens when there's so this one was relating to fairness. So as you can see there, I just pointed out stakeholder inclusivity. So if there's stakeholder inclusivity, it means there's fairness. But if it's not there, it means they're not being fair. Then transparency happens when there's full accountability in the reports generated by the company. So in other words, when we see that there is no missing detail, no missing essential detail on the reports generated, it means there's transparency. Like, for instance, I mean, if a company knows that their product is affecting consumers and they conceal that information, it means they are lacking transparency in that case. See? And many companies, I can assure you, that's what they are doing. they conceal certain information, even if they know that it is negatively affecting the consumers. I wouldn't want to mention which sectors, but the sectors, okay, let me point them out. Food sectors, for example. It's not all companies that will tell you that their products, their food products, they contain certain chemicals that may be very much harmful to human to the human body, you know. So if they are concealing such information to you, it means that they are lacking transparency in that case. See. So, but if we see that there's no missing essential details on the report, no essential information being kept away, you know, for public knowledge, if it is necessary, obviously, then it means there's transparency there. And another way to ensure transparency through audit reports. That's why there are audits. That's why companies get audited. It's because the point is to ensure transparency. Because otherwise, if a company is not audited, look, if the company is, for instance, let me give you an example of, you know, if you look at the lockdowns, I'm just trying to give you a practical example. If you look at the lockdowns, right? When the lockdowns, COVID-19 lockdown began in 2020 there, 27 March to be exact, 2020. When it happened, there are companies, many companies, they could not be functional. In other words, they could not operate. But they had employees, and employees had to be paid salary. Now, but of course, because of lack of operation, it means that the company were not generating any revenue so that they can be able to be capacitated to pay off salaries to their employees. So what would they then do? That's where, for instance, they would claim what we call test funds, or the UIF, for example, right? So now, not all the companies who claimed UIF during that time were legit, for instance. There are some bogus companies which were generated by certain individuals, you know, just for the sole purpose of benefiting from the test funds which were, you know, given by the government. Hello?
Oh, sorry, brief.
Okay. All right. No worries to speak. All right. So obviously there are certain companies which were created by, I mean, fraudulently so, just for the sole purpose of benefiting from those funds. But those companies were really not as legit. And even if some companies were existent, for example, some of the employees that they were, you know, claiming for, they were even non-existent, you know, something like that. So now, obviously, when you try to audit some of those companies, I'm just giving you a practical example here. So when you try to audit some of those companies, they might not be as comfortable or as compliant in producing the necessary required documentation. You know, why is that? It simply means there is lack of transparency in the way they operate, or especially in the leadership in that company. Why? Because they know for a fact that if an audit is conducted, whatever debt or whatever dodgy activity that they took, that they performed, it will be, you know, it will come to the surface, something like that. So yeah, very important, colleagues. I just wanted to give that as an example, just to explain the essence of transparency. So audit reports, they help to ensure transparency in reporting by the organizations. So these are the 6 important principles of leadership, ethical leadership, that one should be aware of. And then in our next lecture class, maybe not today, excuse me, I'm going to talk about organizational ethics, and I would refer you a lot to chapter 5 of the internal audit perspective textbook. I'm going to tackle on chapter 5 as well, which is this one, organizational ethics. So as I deal with principle 2, organizational ethics, in the King 4 report, I'll also tap into chapter 5 of the internal audit perspective textbook, just to explain the ethics management process. It's one of the things I want to explain to you in chapter 5. But that will be for next week. So in lecture number 2, in this module, that's where I will begin to unveil that to you, and then we'll deal with the other principles as we progress. I think we might have like at least maybe 3 to 4 sessions just dealing with corporate governance. Right. So I think from my side, colleagues, I would leave it here. So we've just come to the end of principle 1 on ethical leadership. So we'll deal with principle 2 next week. And as I've already explained, refer you to chapter number 5. So I don't know if you guys have any questions pertaining to what we have just explained for today. I'll show you also before we start with principle 2, how do they test for these principles in the context of an exam or the context of an assignment. I will bring you a practical question next week, just so that you can also, gain perspective over this. Right. Any questions for us?
No questions from my side. Thank you.
Brief,
Yes, to speak?
no question, but I would like to find out,
Yes.
is it possible you can share with us the internal audit perspective,
Yes.
the copy of that?
Definitely I will. I will share
Please.
the materials.
Okay.
I'll make sure that you guys have even the audit notes and footnotes. Remember, I just said in footnotes because these are footnotes that
Yeah, I think the audit notes I have, maybe you can share with Cindy.
okay.
This one for internal audit perspective.
Not a problem. That'll be
Okay.
I'll do so.
Thank you.
All right. It's a pleasure. I don't know if there's any other questions, colleagues. Clarity somehow.
Okay, you mentioned that you will also send us a summary of these. Are you still going to do that, or this is the summary that we just went through?
You mean the summary of what?
A summary of everything that we're going to go through. I'm not sure if it pertains to this chapter, or I'm not sure if maybe I misunderstood you at the beginning. Are there any notes that you're going to provide us with other than this?
Yes. So only for chapter, what is this, on corporate governance. So for corporate governance purposes, right? Yes, there are notes that I can also give you just to, help complement this. But it will be from an undergrad perspective, because it's still built up on the same principles in any case. But what I did personally for myself, when I was doing the module, I would make notes in the textbook like this, especially just primarily for corporate governance. This is what I would do. So I would make notes for myself, especially for important principles of the King for Report, which I knew are going to be examined. So I would make important summaries for myself in the form of footnotes. But then for the other concepts like risk management, control processes, there are summaries that I've literally put in slideshow format for you guys in regards to that. So those I would also share, but of course, when we get to those chapters. But for this one in particular, we would have to use the footnotes.
Okay, cool.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. I don't know if there's any other question or contribution, maybe. Okay. So if there's no any other question, colleagues, thank you so much for your time in tonight's engagement. So till we meet again for lecture 2. So thank you guys, and I'll share these videos on our YouTube channel, and I'll share the video links with you guys on the WhatsApp group. Thank you so much.
Sure, Prof.
Thank you. Bye.